Hello, welcome back again to Marriage Mondays/Tuesdays. We're looking at the remaining 3 myths from this first chapter of Saving Your Marriage Before It Starts. The chapter is entitled, Have You Faced the Myths of Marriage with Honesty? So, myth 1, which we've looked at in the first episode, was we expect exactly the same things from marriage. Myth 2, which we'll now look into, everything good in our relationship will get better. We've heard the songs, we've seen the films where if you get the right relationship, then everything good in that relationship will just get better. But they say here, the parrots who wrote this book, the truth is that not everything gets better. Every successful marriage requires necessary losses. There's an example in the book, and then I'll show an example from my own life. For starters, they say here, marriage is a rite of passage, and that often means giving up on things such as childhood. Molly, here, a 23-year-old newlywed, recalled the unexpected loss she felt just after her engagement. As soon as we announced that we were getting married, I became like a little girl, she said. That night I cried on my father's shoulder and had this terrible sad feeling that I was leaving my family forever. I looked at David, my fiance, and thought, who is this man who's taking me away? There are necessary losses when it comes to getting married. For me, before I got married, my parents were always the people that I went to whenever there was any kind of decision, whether a big life decision or small. I would speak to them and ask them for advice, ask them to pray for me. And now, as I've got married, they are not the first people that I go to speak to. It's now my wife who I speak to first. That doesn't mean that I can't speak to my parents about difficult things, about tough decisions, but it means that they are not the first people that I go and speak to. There's an author, Mike Mason, who explains this kind of phenomenon in his book, The Mystery of Marriage. He says that marriage is like a tree growing through the center of your living room. It is something that's just there and is huge, and everything has to be built around it. And wherever one happens to be going, to the fridge, to bed, to the bathroom, or to the front door, the tree has to be taken into account. It cannot be gone through. It must be respectfully gone around. It is beautiful, unique, exotic, but also, let's face it, at times it's a bit of an inconvenience. When I was single, I had a choice. I had the sole choice of what I did with my time and with my money and with so many other different things. Now that I'm married, it's a decision that we make together, what we do with our resources. Going forward, they say here that each of us constructs an idealized image of the person that we marry. And I agree with that. It's difficult because we each have this idea growing up of this is the woman, this is the man that I'm going to marry, this kind of person. But we never pick that person because they're a figment of our imagination. And it then can get difficult when it comes to the reality of marrying someone that we're not marrying the person that we've had in our dreams. The parrots talk about an attorney who spoke to them, who handles a lot of divorce cases, and he told them that the number one reason two people split up is they refuse to accept that the fact that they are married to a human being. So a letdown may be inevitable, but once we realize that marriage is not a source of constant romance, we can appreciate the fleeting moments of romance for what they are, a very special experience. And the good news, they say, is disenchantment enables you to move to deeper intimacy. That's myth 2. Myth 3. Everything bad in my life will disappear. They've used here the fairy tale of Cinderella, and like so many fairy tales, it ends with they fall in love and live happily ever after. But have any of you ever thought, really? Because they have here. They say, no matter that Cinderella has been socialised to feel at home among the kitchen ashes and would have no idea how to behave in the pomp and circumstance of the royal court. No matter that Prince Charming has grown up in an entirely different culture and acquired its education, tastes, and manners, no matter that the two of them know nothing about each other's attitudes toward the roles of wives and husbands, all they have in common is a glass slipper and a foot that fits it. But of course, love doesn't work that way, you might say. It's just a child's fable, that's true. But deep down, like I mentioned in the previous myth, we long for a Prince Charming or a Cinderella to right the wrongs that make everything go away. They say later, most of the complaints about matrimony arise not because it's worse than the rest of life, but because it's not incomparably better. However, there was a study that they look at from some Colorado psychologists. They ran a marriage survey in the Rocky Mountain News, and they were surprised by the number of people who endured traumatic childhoods, whether through abuse of some kind, and they healed themselves through good marriages. One of the researchers explains good marriages overcome things we tend to think of as irretrievable losses or irreconcilable tragedies. In other words, there's been a major shift in focus from marriage therapy to marriage as therapy. There was something very interesting which the Archbishop of Canterbury, Robert Runke, said at the wedding of Prince Charles and Lady Diana, those many years ago. He said, "Here is the stuff of which fairy tales are made, the prince and the princess on their wedding day, but fairy tales usually end at this point with the simple phrase, and they lived happily ever after." This may be because fairy tales regard marriage as an anticlimax after the romance of courtship. This is not the Christian view. Our faith sees the wedding day not as a place of arrival, but the place where the adventure begins. Going on to the fourth myth, my spouse will make me whole. You've heard it in the rom-coms. Tom Cruise says to Renee Zellweger's character, "You complete me." Tom's wrong, I'm afraid. The book of Proverbs says, "As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another." Our incompleteness and differences give iron its roughness, its sharpening power. Marriage is a God-given way to improve and hone our beings. Marriage challenges us to new heights and calls us to be the best person possible. But neither marriage nor our partner will magically make us whole. I've heard it expressed, a broken man and a broken woman will not become fixed after they've said, "I do." But if you're married and are complaining because your marriage partner does not instantly complete, that doesn't mean necessarily that you've married the wrong person. And there are a few more ideas just to finish here. They go through A frame, like an A letter, H frame, and M frame relationships. They say here in the book, A frame relationships are symbolized by the capital letter A. Partners have strong couple identity, but very little self-esteem. They think of themselves as a unit rather than as separate individuals, like the long lines in the letter A. They lean on one another. The relationship is structured so that if one lets go, the other falls. And that is exactly what happens when one partner outgrows his or her dependency needs. Then we have the H-frame relationships. They're structured like a capital H. Partners stand virtually alone, each self-sufficient and neither influenced much by the other. There is little or no other couple identity and little emotional connection. If one lets go, the other barely feels it at all. And finally, we have the M frame relationships. They rest on interdependence. Each partner has esteem and is committed to helping the other partner grow. They could stand on their own, but they choose to be together. The relationship involves mutual influence and emotional support. M-frame relationships exhibit a meaningful couple identity. If one lets go, the other feels a loss but recovers the balance. So to conclude, we have gone through 4 myths in marriage. 1, we expect exactly the same things in marriage. 2, everything good in our relationship will get better. 3, everything bad in my life will disappear. And 4, my spouse will make me whole. It says here, if you're discouraged by having held such myths as true, everyone else believes in some falsehoods to some degree, and every successful marriage patiently works to challenge and debunk these myths. In biblical times, the special status of bride and groom lasted a full year. If a man was recently married, he must not be sent to war or have any other duty laid on him for 1 whole year. He is to be free to stay at home and bring happiness to the wife he has married. The beginning of marriage was a time of learning and adapting. It still is. So allow yourself that same luxury. Allow yourself to adapt and grow together, whether you've been married for 1 year, haven't got married yet, or been married many years. There are some questions at the end of each chapter, and if you're interested in looking at those questions with your partner, I will put them in the description down below. Thank you very much for listening. Please join me next week for Marriage Mondays. It will be on Monday, and our chapter will be, can you identify your love style? Thank you.